This is the legacy matchup of new Freddy Krueger versus original Freddy Krueger. I think this is going to be quite interesting because which one posed more of a threat?
Yeah, that was when we were talking about that before. This is tricky because with the new one, with the new Freddy Krueger version, he's not the murderer. He's a molester. It's awful and it's ugly, but he's not a murderer in that sense. He gets driven to it when he's killed and all the rest of the kind of stuff that happens after that, but he's not the murderer that he is in the original ones. Now, the original ones, people think of, and myself included, you get to all the sequels and all the ridiculousness and all the overblown stuff and all the silliness, but ultimately he's still a killer. Whereas with the new one, it sort of is like he's driven to that because of what they did to him, even though he wasn't so good to begin with. So it's kind of like, it's really tricky to even talk about to compare the movies, that's easy, but to compare the character, it's real tricky. Like we were having a tough time talking about it before because it's a little tricky.
Yeah. So you're saying molesting's okay, but murdering's not?
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
I'm teasing. I don't know because I saw the new Freddy is just plain ugly, right? His character, after his backstory, is plain ugly, which kind of is like Freddy in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, where if you said there wasn't really any joking, there wasn't, he hadn't become this like pop icon yet, so I think that they were kind of akin in that way, but as later on as the Freddy brand grew, he became, once you see somebody go on talk shows and appear in different venues, it no longer is scary. And it wasn't scary, so they had to, instead of pushing the fright of these films, they pushed the humor. Yeah. So by the time you get to the 3D one where he dies, sorry, spoilers. But then again, he was already dead. Yeah. It was basically a comedy.
Yeah. Right. Well, and that's kind of the thing too. Is like we were talking about before about how, in terms of being a threat, any character we talk about, being a threat, it's one of those things where, if you think about the new Freddy, his fixation was one human being ultimately. This was his one obsession, and this was the molestation thing, which it's not what I said, okay? But it focuses on one human being, whereas like with the original Nightmare on Elm Street films, it's kind of just becomes this smorgasbord, and like it's not really focused on any one person as it starts to build. I mean, it kind of is vaguely, but it really isn't. So I mean, he was more of a threat in that sense, because you can just sort of like just happen to be there, you're going to be in trouble. Whereas with the new one, it's sort of like all came down to that girl.
Right. Or they would try to loosely link somehow.
Yeah, but I mean,
the main character. Yeah, as it went on. Yeah.
I mean, it was like, and it's a soup. I mean, it's
But I have to say that A New Nightmare, the very last Nightmare on Elm Street before the Jason versus Freddy, that did kind of try to go back to the original Nightmare. Yeah. And they kind of threw out all the hokey jokiness from that and tried to make it scary again, but I think it was too far gone, the whole franchise by that.
Yeah, you can't remember, you can't kind of backtrack mentally, and you're still stuck on this kind of the comic stuff. And
so in that, stuff. So in the original Nightmare and in the new Nightmare, Freddy are very similar and are both very, potentially pose the same threat to you because they're not, they don't care about, standing around and mugging for the camera. Yeah. They're just going to kill you. They're going to toy with you, then they're going to kill you. And but both Freddys, one of them, there probably will not be a sequel to this new one. But I'm sure that if they did a sequel, you would eventually get to the same point that you did in the others if they kept on going on, whether it be in a theatrical venue or video on demand or straight to whatever. It would end up being that.
Oh yeah, totally. If you flip those two around, you're 100% right.
They'll probably end up in the same place.
Well, another thing too with the new Nightmare movie, Jackie Earle Haley, the actor who plays Freddy Krueger, he was also in this movie called Little Children, and it's a great movie. Terrible, but great. Like, it's really well done. It's an awesome movie. It's not one you watch and you're gonna go have fun with friends at the park afterward. Like, it's a heavy movie, but he plays that kind of threat to children kind of role.
Right.
And what's interesting is like with Robert Englund, you know, he's been in tons of stuff, and he's this icon in and of himself, not just the character, not just one character. He's this icon in and of himself. Whereas like Jackie Earle Haley was not a horror guy, but he just came from this very different sort of more artsy.
Hey, there were horrible moments in the Bad News Bears.
All right,
No.
fine.
But
No, I somewhat agree. I like the new Freddy much better than the old one because I hated the campiness that they went to.
That's the thing.
because
And I thought the new one posed
but eventually that's what happens. I think to everything.
Well,
to
it
everything
happened in
once-
Jason X when they turned him into a cyborg in space. That was hilarious.
Well, and that's one of those things where you just look at the set pieces and you look at his outfit and you're like, why on earth? Again, with the mask, if you know those movies, it's like, well, the mask wasn't part of the character to begin with anyway.
Yeah.
You know, for starters, and then it's sort of like, why on earth would that be still maintain part?
Because it looked cool. So, we're going to give round 3 to original Freddy. You agree?
Yeah, I think so. As the murderer, I think that makes him. Yeah.
All right.